After decades of advocating for a two-state solution, many Israelis are being galvanized for a one-state alternative.
I think, first of all, in the last couple of years, many people in Israel realized that the two-state solution is just not working. We saw endless terror attacks against Israelis and Jews in the past 30 years since the Oslo Accords. But I think the 7th of October really changed the reality in a way that people realized that we have to wake up and we have to find alternative vision. And this is actually exactly what we're trying to do here tonight, to set a new vision.
Well, let's take that the next step. In order to create a plan like this, it needs to have ground, it needs to maybe have a party, it needs to actually develop into something concrete. What are those steps?
First of all, I think what we're doing here tonight is to launch the plan. I came to David Friedman a couple of months ago and I told him, listen, David, the fact that that you wrote your book and you're launching your vision in America, it's beautiful. But if Israel would not say, this is what we want, it's not going to happen. So we have to start launching this plan here in Israel. This is what we're doing here. We are launching it. You'll meet here many ambassadors and members of Knesset and ministers would come here to be part of that. And we will push this vision forward in the Knesset, in the government, in the academia. You see here many professors and specialists. In the army, we're going to push this vision forward.
How are you not speaking to the choir when the goal is to speak to the masses and to reshape some of the thinking politically that the average Israeli might have?
I think that the average Israeli, even a right-wing voter, if you would ask him what's his vision, what's his dream, most likely that you would not get so many answers, because I think after 30 years of Oslo, we were educated that that's the only solution on the table. So I think what we have to do, and this evening is part of that, is to educate people that there are other alternatives, there are other visions, there are other ideas that we can investigate. I mean, people don't have to accept Ambassador Friedman's plan completely. They can have questions, but we have to open our minds to other alternatives.
The international arena is going to say to you, the politicians and anyone who's looking at the day after in Gaza, how does that look?
I think the day after, not just in Gaza, but also in Lebanon and in the entire Middle East is going to be much, much better, because what Israel is now doing in the past year is bringing a message of peace and salvation to many nations in the Middle East. And I can tell that I had several meetings, incredible meetings in the last couple of weeks with leaders from all across the Middle East, telling me that what the IDF is doing is saving them from the evil regime of Iran, which basically also trying to destroy and kill them, not just Israel. So yes, Israel is saving the Middle East. Israel is bringing a message of freedom and hope. And this is what we will see in Gaza, in Lebanon, and this is why also applying Israeli sovereignty in Judea and Samaria, that will truly bring peace, prosperity, and stability to everybody, the Arabs and the Jews alike.
Ever since the outbreak of this war, what we have discovered is that so much of the world cannot get past this idea of a two-state solution, of the idea that the Arabs who live in this country, who are now called Palestinians, have some territorial or national rights. And this paradigm needs to be broken. It needs to be broken so that we can move forward to a future that is based on historical truth, that is based on God's word, and that is based on sound policy that will make everybody's lives better. And again, the only way to break through is to get away from this delusion called the two-state solution. One thing, and I was having a conversation with Ambassador Friedman months ago when he was in the early stages of writing this book, and he said something that really struck me really hard, because I was talking to him about his ideas, and I was like, wow, this is great, get the Trump administration in, and we'll change things, and it'll be an extension of the Abraham Accords, and all these lovely ideas. And then he said something very powerful. He said, you know, if I went to President Trump, let's say he gets elected, and I go to him and I say, President Trump, you should support Israeli sovereignty over the entire land of Israel, and we'll raise up the people there, and we'll de-radicalize them. And if I present the whole plan to him, you know what he'd say to me? What do the Israelis want to do? And it hit me like a smack to the head when he said that, because I realized that the one thing that the leadership of Israel and the Jewish people has never done is simply say, this whole land is ours. This land is ours. And by simply saying that and making it clear that that's the starting point, we are no longer going to be stuck in the self-delusion of the two-state solution. You see, the two-state solution is not only a particular policy prescription. It's actually a whole way of thinking. It's a way of thinking that's based in assuming motives of our enemies that they don't actually say are their motives. We say, oh, they just want to live side by side. They want to have their own independent state. No, they want to destroy Israel. They say it. So we have to no longer impose our own fantasies about what their motives are on them and just listen to what they're saying. That's number one. Number two, it's based on a historical fallacy. The historical fallacy that there's this nation called the Palestinians that deserves some homeland, when we know that historically that's simply not true. And in the San Remo conference, the entire area that was called Palestine under the at the end of the Ottoman Empire, what was deemed Palestine, which includes all of Jordan and Israel today, and even some parts of Syria, that was designated to create a homeland for the people of Israel, was then divided so that there would be an Arab state for all the local Arabs, and that became the Kingdom of Jordan. And suddenly today we have this new idea, starting in 1964, Yasser Arafat came up with this idea to name the people the Palestinian people. It's a historical falsehood. So a policy that's based in historical falsehood and based on self-delusion of imposing motives on our enemies that they don't have is always going to fail.
How do you change the paradigm of educating the majority of Israelis to that school of thought? Because some of the people here are those that already buy in, right?
Well, it starts, that's a great question, and it's a heavy lift. But a very small silver lining in the very dark cloud of October 7th is that more and more Israelis are rethinking things on their own. They haven't landed in a solution yet, and they haven't necessarily crossed over and become totally part of our camp. But having these conversations proudly and openly and putting forward the ideas is the first step. Getting our own community to feel confident in talking about these things, and instead of always feeling apologetic of trying to come up with some sort of appeasement plan. I think a huge percentage of Israelis are actually ready. Let me give you an indication of that. During this war, back in early July, right before Prime Minister Netanyahu addressed Congress, the Knesset passed a messaging bill, but an important messaging bill, where the Knesset voted on whether they are willing to accept any talk of a two-state solution. The vote was 66-0 among non-Arab Knesset members.
The international community is going to push hard and ask you two questions. What happens to the Israeli Arabs in Israel, and what happens to the Palestinians, particularly the day after the war? How do you respond to that question?
Well, when people talk about the day after, even the expression itself makes it sound like the day after we're going to snap our fingers and implement a solution. The day after is going to be decades long. It's going to be a long process. Just think about this. The Oslo process that led us to the whole Palestinian Authority and everything we have today was 1993. That's 31 years ago. And there's still officially a process that's underway, right? Processes take time. The de-radicalization of the population of Arabs who live in Judea, Samaria, and the Gaza Strip has to happen. And for that to happen, there can't be independence over the education system led by the Palestinian Authority or Hamas or anyone else. That's obvious. So when we talk about a day after plan that involves de-radicalizing them so that they can be prepared to have some measure of local autonomy controlling their lives, it still has to be within a framework that is governed by someone else other than them. Does that mean involving the Abraham Accords countries in this, people like the Emiratis? A very good sign this past week, the Emiratis got boots on the ground in Gaza helping with the distribution of the humanitarian aid. And that sort of went under the radar in the news, but to me that's a paradigm shift, because now you have the Emiratis already getting involved in the life of Palestinians. Where in the Arab world does anyone have the right to vote in a democratic election? It's not like they can do that in Syria or in Iraq, or in Egypt, or anywhere. There's no normal democratic elections in any of these countries. So suddenly we're all up in arms if Israel implements a plan where these people can't vote in a federal election but are voting for municipal authority. Look, it's a unique problem here, and we can have unique solutions to unique problems.
A Middle East summit convened to talk about a one-state solution. The concept has been thrown around for years, but now, since October 7th, many are looking at it in a different way. As you can see behind me, there are hundreds of people that have come to attend this conference to talk about the importance of finding solutions for the future of the State of Israel and living with their Palestinian neighbors. From Jerusalem, Felice Friedson reporting for the Media Line.